Hey everyone, it's Colin. How's it going? There are certain things that I like, and if you don't like those same things, what you like sucks, and you're wrong for liking it. At least that's the way it seems to work on the internet. So this time, of course, we're talking about the culture of fanboys. And to clarify, this is a multi-gender type of topic. I'm just picked the word fanboy because that's the one that most people are probably familiar with, but fangirls are certainly a thing as well. And it's really just the concept of people who are just absolutely diehard into the products and technologies and things overall that they like to the exclusion of everything else. And it's something that I see all the time on the internet, especially in the form of comments on my videos. If I put up a review of something along those lines, you'll ultimately get a certain percentage of people chiming in saying, oh, this thing is a piece of junk and I like this other thing better. Well, why? And they can never really give you that concrete of an answer. So I wanted to explore this topic and really just kind of, put the thinking cap on and figure out, why do people act this way? I'm not really here to, pass judgment over people for liking what they like. And maybe they've got legitimate reasons for not liking the same thing that I do. And I'm fine with that. But I've never really quite understood exactly why people are almost religious to a point with this, where they'll fight tooth and nail over just like a product or a company, a manufacturer that they happen to like. And anyone who dare says anything against that suddenly becomes an enemy to them, and they've got to attack it and defend it. That just doesn't make any logical sense. So this is another one of those thinking kinds of episodes, hopefully to get you to maybe, mentally process one and maybe come to your own conclusions on this. And maybe they're different than mine, and that's okay. But in sitting and thinking about the concept of fanboys and fangirls, I really kind of came down to 3 points as to, where this whole concept may be coming from. And I think they're both old concepts and new concepts, and they all work together. They all merge together to create this perfect storm. So I figure we might as well go through them. The first one is this concept called tribalism. It comes in a few different other names, but basically the whole idea is you stick with what you know. You stick with the people, the group that you are familiar with, or maybe you were raised with. And it's a very, very old concept. Like its name, tribalism, it kind of stems back to the days when we didn't have modern technology and people were literally, almost exclusively living in tribes or packs of people. And it was not necessarily because they liked that particular group of people. It's because they needed to be with a group of people in order to survive. I mean, we're talking back in the kind of hunting gathering types of days when humans had natural predators, like you think living out in the wilderness, there are all sorts of wild animals and stuff. And this is way before technology that really let people effectively defend themselves from these animals. So to live in a tribe or another group of people meant a better chance of survival, right? You could work together for a common goal, of course, survival. And you had the whole strength in numbers thing, right? You were able to delegate tasks to some people who were better and some people who were, not so good. They did something else. And it generally just meant that life was going to be easier for you, or at least you yourself had a better chance of, living a longer life and not getting hunted down by a lion or a bear or something like that. And because of the nature of that, you generally tended to stick with the tribe or group of people that you were with. It wasn't so much like if you didn't like that tribe, you would just leave and go find another one. It was generally, you would stick with the one that you were in for life because of the difficulty in switching and also because of another concept we'll get to in a moment. But, because of that, it's been such a long time running that, humans lived that way. And in some ways, we still kind of live that way now. It's ingrained in us. It's deeply ingrained in us. It's instinctual. It's really, really tough to fight those urges to be loyal to the things you're familiar with, the things that, are working for you. Why change? Why switch when there's so much other risk out there, So to go on your own, to throw away what you're familiar with, the things that protect you and help you and all that, well, that's basically like leaving a tribe. And that can be very scary. And that can cause a lot more work. And so, if you take these ancient concepts and move them to today, it kind of makes sense, like if you're a fanboy of, say, PlayStation, for example, why would you even want to switch to Xbox? Well, maybe PlayStation's done really well for you and it's familiar and you're comfortable with it. You may not have any reason to switch. But is it worth really getting worked up when somebody attacks you? Well, I think that's an instinctual thing too, right? I mean, if you think about it logically, who cares, right? If someone says, oh, PlayStation sucks and Xbox rules, what stake do you personally have in that? Really, who cares? But it strikes that nerve in us. It's like someone is attacking our tribe, and that kind of pack mentality really works both ways. The tribe helps us, but we also have to help to defend the tribe, because if the tribe gets attacked, it's like we each individually get attacked as well. It threatens our survival. So we go into that fight or flight kind of mode, and a lot of people go into fight instead of flight. And so they're going to defend themselves in the guise of defending their tribe. So it's really kind of easy to see how a very simple statement on the internet meant, honestly, or just as part of trolling, can quickly spiral into an argument just on that concept of tribalism alone, where it's like people themselves feel threatened over something that really has absolutely nothing to do directly with them. It's just a product or a service that you own and use. Really, who cares? But deep down, it just incites this response in us. The next part of this is also another real kind of ancient, I feel like, instinct type of deal that we didn't necessarily learn. It's just ingrained in us. And it's the concept of the fear of the unknown. And I think it dovetails nicely with the tribalism thing, where unknown things are scary, is basically the idea. It's a risk. Everything is a risk. But things that you don't know, things that you haven't experienced or understand could threaten you. And nowadays, that's not really as big of a case. But again, if you think back in the days when we didn't really have modern technology and we were entirely living off the land, again, the hunter-gatherer type of thing, when a lot of these instincts were really ingrained in humans because of how long and how hard life, how long that was and how hard life was back then, the fear of the unknown makes logical sense when you think about it from that perspective, from that time frame. Because if you, for example, you're sleeping at night and you hear this rustling out maybe, in the distance, well, that could just be the wind. That could be a small animal, or it could be a lion or a tiger or some other predator that's stalking you. And rightfully so, you probably would be fearful. You'd hear that noise and you'd get concerned because you didn't know what it was. It could be something completely innocuous. It could be something that could kill you in a matter of seconds. And so the fear of the unknown, I think, is what keeps people stuck in the so-called tribes that they're in. the whatever it is that they're a fanboy or fangirl about, the fear of switching to something else and losing out on what you already have is a strong instinct. It's a strong feeling. It's difficult to shake that, well, what if, what if I switch from PlayStation to Xbox? What if I don't like it? What if it's not the same? What if it's, a worse experience, all of these other things, and it kind of paralyzes people and gets them to be stuck. And, I do think that some people just legitimately like to live fairly innocuous, kind of cookie cutter type of lives where they just do the same thing over and over again. But there's a scale to that as well, right? Do you really just legit want to be in the movie Groundhog Day where you just do the same thing over and over again? Or is it more like you've got habits and patterns that keep you grounded so you can spend that mental capacity, that time, in your head thinking on other stuff? But fear of the unknown, it doesn't come to the forefront, of course, when you think of being a fanboy or a fangirl, but I think it is deep-seated back in there. And, maybe if you look at some of those comments online, the real defensive ones, you might see some of that kind of echo in those comments. The third one is a little bit more modern, but I think it's just as important as well. And it's the concept of confirmation bias. Confirmation bias goes like this. We naturally want to believe that we're right, of course. And we will go to various extents to prove that we're right. Not just to others, but to ourselves, right? We want to believe that we're right, but we want to be able to convince ourselves that we're right in whatever it is that we believe. Whether that's, a long-standing, conceptual type of belief, or even as something as simple as, confirming that we feel we bought the right product, that we did the right thing, that we're making correct decisions. We need to feel validated that we're correct. We don't like that uncertainty of, well, I made this decision, but I don't know if it's right or not. We as humans hate that. So confirmation bias is where we will seek out information that confirms what we already know, that confirms that we're right. But it's this subconscious thing where we'll skip over or cut out or even ignore information to the contrary, right? Where we could say buy a product and we're convinced that we bought the right thing, and we'll seek out information that confirms we bought the right thing, even though there may be just as much, if not more information suggesting that no, we didn't buy the right thing. I actually see this directly quite a bit in that a lot of times when I do product reviews, down in the comments, I'll get comments from people saying, yeah, I've got this product and this review is spot on, or you missed this one part of this product in the review, or something like that. And I always sit there and wonder, if you already own the product, why are you watching a review about it? Shouldn't you have done that first? I mean, I'm sure some people, maybe watched the review and convinced that they should have bought the product and they bought it and then came back to the video to leave a comment to say, thanks for doing the review. It helped me or whatever. But there are still a lot of them that really read like they already had the product and then they found my review and wanted to leave their 2 cents about it. And most of the time, the comments that are left are positive, basically confirming that the review, it lives up to what the product is, and more or less that the person leaving the comment feels validated, that this, review reflects the same opinion that they have. Of course, unless it's a negative review that completely tears a product apart, but I haven't done very many of those because, quite frankly, I don't like to review crap. I suppose that's probably, if you'll allow me a quick little side note here, sometimes people get on me down in the comments of reviews saying that I wasn't hard enough on a product or that I glossed over these major problems or something like that. why don't I do negative reviews? It always seems like I'm selling out or whatever. The simple fact is, I don't want to waste my time with products that suck, because I think it's pretty obvious which products suck, right? It's not very common where you'll find a product that is mass market, that's got a lot of money behind it in terms of advertising and marketing and generating a lot of social media buzz and all that kind of stuff, and it comes out and it's just complete garbage. There are plenty of products that may have shortcomings when they're released, but generally the stuff that's released, at least from big name manufacturers, if you've heard about it, chances are it's at least halfway good. And those are the kinds of products that I tend to review, because I feel like if it's a completely unknown product that really isn't any good at all, one, it wouldn't have made it to market, or two, I probably wouldn't have even heard about it, because I'm not seeking out that kind of review. There are plenty of other people on YouTube who love to do reviews of just garbage, and they can be absolutely hilarious, and more power to them, because they're managing to make lemonade out of lemons, if you know what I mean. But that's just not what I do. So if you're curious as to why I don't take a product and just completely tear it to shreds and explain at length why you should never spend any of your money on it, well, that's why. I don't think most companies go into it being like, you know what, we're going to develop a piece of garbage product and put it out there anyway and hope that people buy it. The market's too competitive. That doesn't really happen. Anyway, so confirmation bias is another just big factor in this whole fanboy fangirl thing. And it's tough, because you want to recognize your own biases. You want to actively prevent them from getting the better of you, from having effect on your decision-making process, that sort of thing. But it's really, really, really tough, because we do it just all the time, all day, and we don't even realize it. Here's a real life example. So I've been driving one manufacturer of cars for over a decade now. I've owned 3 of them from this manufacturer, bought brand new. Over a decade been driving, these manufacturers' cars. And I figured, I'm probably going to be driving this manufacturer's cars for forever, right? Because generally I've been really happy with them. They've performed well. They've done what I needed to do. They've been reliable and all of that. And I figured there'd be no reason why to switch. So in some ways, I guess you could say I was a fanboy for that manufacturer. Well, the most recent time when I went to buy a car earlier this year, I looked at that manufacturer, and none of the vehicles that they had really truly excited me. I mean, they would have all been good choices, the ones that I narrowed down. They would have done admirably, but I wouldn't have been terribly excited to get in one of those vehicles and drive it every day. But what's interesting was there was another manufacturer that had a vehicle that seemed really interesting. And I'd heard of the manufacturer. I knew that they had a good reputation, and that there are definitely, fanboys and fangirls of that manufacturer too, even perhaps more vocal than the ones behind, the particular car maker that I tended to follow. But there was just something about this one vehicle, and I figured, there's no harm in going for a test drive in it, right? I figured I'm probably going to go buy, just another one of the, the vehicles from the automaker that I've kept buying cars from. But I took a test drive in this other vehicle, and I was sold right away. Wow, why did I not check out this manufacturer before? Why haven't I allowed myself to look at this manufacturer's cars years ago? Because there's a lot of stuff that car did right that the other cars didn't. And I ended up buying it. I ended up switching, in quotes, brands. Now, I didn't actually switch, because my wife and I have 2 cars, and one of them is still from the other manufacturer, and I still really like that other vehicle. So, by all rights, I should be a fanboy of both. or I should at least, be a fan, maybe not fanboy, but just, generally approval of both of these manufacturers. But that's not actually how it works. What I've found is I keep thinking more about this new car manufacturer and less about the old one. As I'm just keeping up with automotive news, because it's a hobby that I have. I've done videos on it before. Most of you don't really care when I do them, but cars are something that I'm interested in. So I like to keep up with what's going on in the market. And I've found that I've been paying less attention to that old automaker and more attention to the new one, even though I own one of each. I should be giving them equal time, mentally, but I don't. That's the power of this whole confirmation bias thing, right? I keep coming back to the new car that I bought was the right one and proving to myself that it is, to the point where I'm even cutting out previously good choices from my thinking process. And that's really the root of fanboyism, at least when people get all worked up into a tizzy when their favorite things are attacked on the internet. When people say, oh, I don't like that because of this, we take it personally, because saying that, again, PlayStation sucks and Xbox rules, or the other way around, it's like it's attacking our own decision-making process and our own opinions. And it's basically saying that we're wrong, even though that may not be the case, right? I mean, someone may say, oh, I hate PlayStation and I love Xbox because of these reasons. Well, the nature is going to be, for the PlayStation fanboys to jump on that comment and attack and defend, no, you're wrong. PlayStation's good and Xbox sucks and here's why, blah, blah, blah. But that's completely ignoring the point that a lot of times statements like PlayStation sucks and Xbox rules or whatever are done in the context of that person's opinion. They're hardly ever meant to be these blanket statements saying PlayStation sucks for everyone and Xbox rules for everyone. At least when it comes to YouTube comments, social media discussion, that kind of stuff, more often than not, those comments come across sounding like they're meant to be these blanket statements, as if no one should be allowed to have a PlayStation. But if you read between the lines, and especially if you start to read like the justification that someone may have behind a statement like that, it's really all PlayStation sucks for that one person for specific reasons that, may not apply to everybody. But because of our nature, we get, blindsided by comments like that, and the tunnel vision kind of kicks in and we focus on just the key words of basically you're wrong, is what they're effectively telling us. And so we get really defensive and start freaking out, and then it turns into this big nasty discussion. And I think it's kind of the root of why, YouTube comments, the joke about why YouTube comments suck so bad, why it's just garbage, is because people can't pause for a moment and reread what they're reading or ask for clarification of what they're hearing and think about it. Just process it for a moment. Take a breath. Realize that chances are it's not a personal attack. Chances are it's someone just saying they don't like a certain thing because of a certain reason. And maybe that reason is true. Maybe that reason's false. Someone who really has their wits about them and is, calm and rational and thinking completely logically without any emotion would respond to a comment like that saying, well, I'm sorry that this specific thing doesn't work out for you. Obviously, this is a preference. Why is it that way for you? Instead of just jumping into the, no, you're wrong, I'm right, your thing sucks and my thing's good kind of rhetoric. And it just keeps going back and forth. And the arguments actually kind of become formulaic if you've seen enough of them, where they start out fairly general, saying, oh, this sucks and this other thing rules. And then someone jumps in to defend and flips it around and basically says, no, my thing rules and your thing sucks. And then they start sparring with like bullet points of, these little features or shortcomings or whatever. Oh, well, my thing does this, yours doesn't. Yeah, well, your thing doesn't do this and mine does. And it keeps going down into these little nitty gritty, this back and forth kind of parrying, to the point where one side will run out of bullet points. They'll run out of things about the other side that suck, or things that are good about their side that the other side can't do. And then it devolves into the personal attacks. Well, you're just an idiot. Of course you're going to defend your thing because of blah, 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 and it just devolves even further down into just this big, nasty, ugly mess. It's formulaic because of the way we think. If it wasn't an emotional thing, if fanboyism, fangirlism was this logical process, you would think that the conversations would be more dynamic, more fluid, where it would go into better detail and then, kind of take a big picture approach about, well, if you think about it this way, my thing is better than your thing because of this and all that, and not focusing on, well, mine's got 2 hours better battery life, or, whatever. It's a completely emotional topic, and it defies all logic, which is kind of hilarious when you consider how long we as humans have been, logical beings. We're still very emotional beings, and it's also really interesting to think of just how much our intuition and our instincts and everything still govern us. You know what I mean? Like, it's coming on 2018. We're by all means living in the future, right? I mean, if you believe Back to the Future, we should have flying cars and stuff by now. Yet we're still getting into stupid arguments on the internet over this just meaningless bullet points that serve absolutely no good other than to harden our beliefs even further and make us even less willing to investigate or think about, just be curious about stuff that isn't what we already know, to break out of that cycle of fear of the unknown, to be willing to maybe go visit another tribe and realize that, if it doesn't work out, you can always come back, right? And I understand that when it comes to buying expensive products like cars, it's difficult to undo some of those things, but it still happens. It's people still go out and buy cars that they think they like, and it turns out after a month or 2 or 6, they ended up not liking that car after all. Well, they sell that car and they buy something different. And yeah, they learned an expensive lesson, so to say, but it's not the end of the world. It's good to experiment. It's good to branch out and at least explore alternatives. It's the reason why I own both an Xbox and a PlayStation, because both sides have their own strengths and weaknesses, and they play off of that. As much as I happen to slightly prefer PlayStation over Xbox, okay, maybe a little more than slightly, but I still, I tend to prefer PlayStation, but not to the extent where I'll never touch a Microsoft product. As much as that is the case, and as much as it is that, there's a little bit of self-validation that PlayStation 4, by all accounts, really just did better all around for this generation of console platform, game consoles. I completely concede the fact that the previous gen, the Xbox 360, did a better job. I don't necessarily like to admit that because I think the PS3 was a great console, but I'll admit it because you know what? I think the facts are there. And that's the problem, is really the emotion wraps us up, and it's difficult to see those facts. It's difficult to admit to ourselves that the world isn't necessarily the way we want to believe it to be. And so we just go into blindly and shamelessly defending ourselves, whether we're right or wrong. And sometimes it's humorous on the internet to see, this bickering, because you can just tell both of the people doing it both of them are right and both of them are wrong simultaneously, and ultimately they're arguing for no good. Sometimes it can be thought-provoking, but most of the times it's just kind of boring. I think we've gotten to that point. But anyway, I am curious, of course, as to your thoughts. I think most people fall into the trap of tribalism and fanboy fangirlism and all that more often than we're willing to admit. Have you caught yourself doing it? Have you tried to make a conscious effort to not necessarily do it? And not to say that brand preferences or whatever are bad. You're certainly entitled to have your own opinions and preferences, and there's nothing wrong with that. But have you ever found yourself just shamelessly, endlessly defending something that doesn't necessarily warrant that level of defending or praise or whatever? I'm just curious as to your thoughts, so be sure to share them down in the comments below. If you like the video, I would appreciate a thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at thisdoesnotcomp. And as always, thanks for watching.